Did you ever hear of Kong?
Hello and welcome back to Desperate Living, Cultural Chaos, Forgotten Stories. And today we're going to talk about King Kong, but not, I'm afraid, this rather fine fellow from 1933, even though he remains, no matter what else has come along, the definitive idea of Kong, or even this equally magnificent creation from the 1960s in the classic Monster Mash King Kong vs. Godzilla. No, we're not even going to be discussing the appalling Peter Jackson movie, or even Kong's more recent revivals that have made him once again one of the top movie draws in the world. Nope, we're going to be talking about this.
That is an escape-proof cage, certified by the New York City
That's right, we're going to be discussing the infamous 1976 King Kong, directed by John Guillermin, produced by Dino De Laurentiis. But when I say we're going to talk about this film, I'm probably being slightly disingenuous because we're not actually going to talk about the film. Of course not. If you want to see what I think of the movie, I've actually written an extensive piece on it for Desperate Living sometime in the past when the 4K edition came out, and you can read that and see what I think. It's a fairly chunky piece, and I'll put the link in below this video. But suffice to say that I am a fan of the movie, even though I acknowledge its many faults. I saw this when I was a kid, when it first came out in the cinema, and loved it. And I say that as somebody who was already at that point a huge fan of the original Kong. I didn't feel like this was an insult, and I think that the abuse that this film had, even before it was completed, from a certain section of genre fandom was deeply unfair and often bordering on racist, it has to be said. I do think that the film has probably improved its reputation somewhat over the years, although there are still a lot of people that dislike it intensely. I mean, funnily enough, it did actually have some good reviews at the time. I mean, check this one out from the Daily Mirror, or the Sunday Mirror more accurately. You know, that's as good a quote as you could hope for any movie. So if you've been avoiding this film for any reason, maybe because of its reputation, I would say, by all means, check it out. You might be pleasantly surprised. But like I said, we're not here to talk about the film itself, but rather some of the merchandise. This isn't going to be a complete guide to King Kong 76 merch. I don't think there was that much. I mean, this was a pre-Star Wars era, but I'm sure there's stuff that I didn't have, things like toys, perhaps a poster magazine. There was definitely a film program. So yes, it's not going to be a thorough guide, but it's going to be a run through of the things I bought that hopefully you will enjoy. And if you do enjoy this kind of thing, then don't forget, comment, like, share, subscribe, and maybe even give us some support via our various fundraising methods, all of which, of course, are linked below. So, on with the show. So the first bit of Kong memorabilia to share with you is the tie-in paperback, which is fairly standard procedure for the 1970s, except that this isn't a novelization for some bizarre reason. It's the screenplay by Lorenzo Semple Jr., not the actual screenplay. It's not like a proper screenplay book. It's just stripped down to dialogue and scene descriptions, so it can read a bit like a novel, I suppose, but I'm not quite sure why it wasn't novelised properly. And equally, I'm not sure why they've used this admittedly very striking and impressive bit of artwork from Frank Frazetta on the cover, but it's got nothing to do with the movie. Strangely enough, this book wasn't released in the UK either. I picked this up, as you can see, from the chop in the top as a remainder book. Don't ask me where, I can't remember, but published by Ace. And it's a very odd thing to have as a souvenir volume from the film, because it just does very little to connect itself to the film in terms of the way it looks. And yeah, it's very, very odd. A nice thing to have, but a bit of a curio. Much more widely available than that was the making of book by Bruce Barenberg. As you can see, I mean, it's a fairly official volume. It's got, 50 photos from the film, dotted throughout. Not particularly well printed, it has to be said, but it's a fairly chunky book. It's clocks in at 273 pages, so a decent size. And interestingly, it's not just some kind of hagiography for the film. It's a kind of warts and all look at the making of the movie, on the basis that it still presents the film as being a worthwhile project, but yeah, it certainly doesn't gloss over some of the problems that the movie had and the various controversies that faced it at the time. But this one was everywhere, unlike the tie-in paperback, and it's still fairly easily available now if you want to pick a copy up. And if you're into making of books, this is certainly worth getting. Now, alongside novelizations, of course, soundtrack albums were a big thing in the 1970s, and here's the Kong soundtrack from John Barry, which I think most people seem to admit is, even if they don't like the film, it's a good epic soundtrack from John Barry. Not maybe up there with some of the work he did in the 60s, some of the Bond films, obviously things like Beat Girl, but it's a really good, solid, epic movie soundtrack. And it comes with, you can see it's a bit the worst for wear, but this has a free poster, but instead of being inside the sleeve, as free posters generally were, it's more of a fold-out thing. As you can see, this is another one of my albums that had a bit of water damage to the cover, but has fold-out art, fold-out poster. Again, different artwork from the movie poster, so you get quite a bit of alternative Kong art on the sleeve of this album. And the album itself is fairly, fairly unremarkable package. But it is interesting how so much of this stuff seemed to be under the radar, even at the time that the film was fresh and was new. And certainly the Kong soundtrack again just disappeared very quickly and ended up in remainder shops. I think it was a good few years before I picked this up from Woolworths in one of their kind of 99p clear-outs. Now, obviously there was a lot of Kong cash-ins around the time, the movies that I'm sure you're all aware of, things like Queen Kong and The Mighty Peking Man, and this book is a prime example of that, not just because it actually features several of those films in, but because this is clearly designed to cash in on the new movie. I mean, you can see it's a pretty basically put together publication, written by Jeremy Pascal, published by Phoebus Publishing Company, who I'm not massively familiar with. Of course, the irony of this is that if you were buying this because you were excited about the new movie, out of 64 pages, only 10 of them are actually devoted to the new film. The rest of it is, you know, a pretty good, solid bit of writing about the original Kong, you know, the making of the film. So, you know, you can see that we're heavily into Kong, even down to page 33, and then we get on to The Son of Kong, Mighty Joe Young, King Kong vs. Godzilla, you know, some of the other movies like Konga here and Queen Kong. And it's only really right at the end that they begrudgingly do some coverage of the new film. So, opportunist, but actually I really like this, and you know, I'm really glad to have picked it up and to have held onto it for all these years. Again, I don't know how easily this is available. I mean, you can see like 85p, $1.95 at the time. So that was actually expensive for something of this size, you know, magazine size. At that point, I'm sure it's worth quite a bit more now. Now we come to the piece de resistance of the Kong collection, at least the 76 Kong collection, the board game. And you won't be surprised to hear that yet again this is something that I picked up, I guess, a couple of years after the film was out. Certainly not while the movie was at its height. You know, it's from some obscure toy shop that I just found it, and of course, you know, I had to have it. Now the game itself is not great, as I recall. Released in the UK by Ideal, who were regular producers of such things. I haven't actually looked at this in a very long time. You see the box is still taped together, but that was from when I was moving house just to make sure it was okay. So we have a broken top piece, I suppose. The instructions, and as with a lot of games that people were never going to play more than once, it's a bit fiddly. You've got to put a lot of bits together before you even get started. I think the best board games are the ones where you can just literally get the board out, set it up and play it. But here we have the board, which is pretty long, as you can see. It's the World Trade Center, which of course these days is has a lot of different connotations, especially with planes flying at it, but there we go. And that's the piece that you attach to the front. Let's have a see if there's a way of doing this. How do we attach it? Let's have a go. I might well give this up in a moment, because you know, we don't want this video to go on forever. Oop, there's already a piece fallen on the floor there, so I suppose that goes there. It doesn't look like it goes there. It looks like it. I mean, this is split in two, so I guess you could have left this on the thing. I'll tell you what, you know, it's far too fiddly to muck about with now. Let's just pretend it's just this half of the game, shall we? These are all the pieces. So you have Kong cards. What the hell are these? Attack right foot, attack left foot. Oh, there you go. You can just attack whatever bits of Kong you want. Escape equipment. Here are your little human figures, which had a guess. I'm guessing they're colour coded for different players. There's your little spinner to decide whose go it is. There you go. A nice little Kong figure. That's quite fun, I suppose. And your cardboard Kong, who, there he is. How does he fit on here? Well, I guess there's another piece. Oh no, does he fit on that? Yeah. There you go, yeah, he fits on that piece there. And he makes his way up the building, according to some strange rules, and then he'll spin around, and if your figure is... Let's demonstrate this, shall we? And Kong back there. If your figure happens to be stood here, in this piece, and Kong spins, and he knocks you, then I guess you're back at square one, so it's like a kind of weird snakes and ladders or something. The hands and feet handily labelled here with left and right, lest people get confused. I mean, it technically might be a bit confusing because you could always argue about where you were looking at Kong from. What's his right hand, what's his left hand? Anyway, you know. So there we go. I think I played this game perhaps a grand total of once. Didn't find it fun, as you can probably guess. You know, maybe it's worth having another go at. In my more mature years, perhaps it'll be a bit more entertaining. I mean, clearly there's something about it that made me hold on to it for all these years. That something, of course, will just be Kong nostalgia. I don't have any other movie-based board games. I'm not sure I ever did own any other movie-based board games. Thinking about it. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But anyway, I'm going to put this all back together properly off camera because it's going to take quite a while, I suspect. So while we're here just talking about Kong, this isn't anything to do with the 76 movie, but why not share him at this point? The lovely Aurora King Kong model. This is the glow-in-the-dark edition, as you can see, hence his white feet and the other white parts. You can see, of course, that over the years bits of this have been lost. I think every time I've moved house, one of my Aurora kits, or a couple of my Aurora kits, has been somewhat damaged. This was actually in pieces until earlier today, funnily enough, when I finally decided that it was time to fix it up to show him off for this video. And, you know, look at him, isn't he lovely? I never painted the bodies of these glow-in-the-dark ones because they were more or less the right colour, generally, with one exception, which I can come to at some other point perhaps. But because they had the glowing parts, it didn't really seem like it was worth the effort to actually paint the bodies. But looking at them now, I'm thinking, you know, maybe not. A splash of paint here and there would do him good. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And equally, if you want to see me doing some hilariously botched repair job on my other Aurora model kits, which include Godzilla, the Wolfman and the Mummy, then let me know. I'm more than happy to do this all on camera. Just don't expect some great YouTube repair video. It might be a bit of a disastrous effort, but you know, how hard can it be to glue a few bits of plastic together, especially if they were designed to be glued together in various pieces to begin with. I really love these. That's why I've held on to them for all these years and had to do whatever repairs I could. They're glorious things. I mean, yeah, there we have on the back. I don't know if you can read that. Let's get it in focus. There you go. Aurora 1964. I didn't buy it in 1964 again, not quite that old, but these were still on the shelves well into the 1970s. They sell unmade for their small fortune, and if they're in a box, and even versions like this are, you know, nicely collectible, but you can't have mine. That's all the Kong I have for you today. As I say, if you want to see more of these model kits and me struggling to put them back into some semblance of shape, then let me know in the comments. If you want to see any more explorations of odd, obscure movie merchandise, let me know in the comments. I have bits and pieces lying around, and I'm more than happy to share these things with you. So don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody to check out the Desperate Living site and the Desperate Living YouTube page, and we'll see you again very soon.